Hello and welcome to week 46's Dinosaw, another 7 curious interesting things I saw last week. So let's crack on. First of all is San Diego and their streetlights. So about 5 years ago there was a program to put cameras in streetlights to detect traffic and look at essentially the infrastructure around San Diego. So it turns out, as these all do, people had privacy concerns. The police had access to these cameras and had used it 400 times in the last 2 years alone. The mayor then said, okay, let's switch these cameras off until we can actually get this sorted out. And it wasn't as simple as that. So the contract originally was with one company, it transferred to another company, and now the new company basically said, look, we didn't really design these cameras, and it turns out that if you have the light on, it shares the same power with the camera. So you have to have the camera off. So if you turn the camera off, the lights go off. So it's a sort of an interesting lesson for the future of town planning, because it sort of mixes infrastructure with technology and privacy, and just such a simple goof can create such a mess, basically. So that's that one. So not really sure what they're going to do about that. They're going to have a look at trying to get their way out of this using software. They have sort of got to a midway house because they can say, well, the cameras are still recording, but we've just turned off the network, so they're not actually sending the data to the mainframe now. So yeah, a lesson to be learned there. This is Project Amber. Now this is from sort of the Alphabet or Google sort of X project. So experimental projects come out of this sort of area, and this one was all to do with trying to detect or at least track depression and anxiety. So the project team created essentially a skull cap that can detect your EEG, so your brain waves. It then amplifies them very simply. It then uses machine learning to look for signals within it, sort of getting rid of the noise, so you don't need as much signal to actually make some sort of good results. Now this is all really based on sort of the brain's reward system. So it turns out that if you are sort of rewarded, your brain reacts in a certain way, and you can detect that through the brainwave. So and people with anxiety or depression have a lower reaction to this, so that's what it was detecting. Now in the end, they didn't really find this kind of one sort of magic key that they could turn and say yes or no. So they sort of disbanded the project, but they did make it public. So I thought that was what was the really interesting thing about this one, is a little bit like sort of Tesla and Hyperloop, where, you know, this project is bigger than us, and therefore we can't really take it any further. We're going to give it to the world. So it's now available. It's open sourced. All the code is on GitHub. All the results are on there as well. So I'm not saying anybody watching this is going to take up the mantle and run with it, but that's really interesting, at least what they were trying to do. And it was more diagnosis, by the way, or at least tracking. So if you've been diagnosed with diabetes, for instance, you would have glucose tests further on just to track whether you're going up or down. So this was theoretically the same. It wasn't to say take this test and we'll find out whether you are depressed or anxious. It was once you have been clinically diagnosed, we can then use it to track your progress. So laudable aim, but unfortunately it ended up not actually finding out what they wanted to, but it's out there. ROBORACE, so I've been following this for several years. So this is the fully autonomous racing system. So this is not essentially trying to be electric cars with humans in. This is electric cars with no humans in. And the ROBORACE series, and this is the kind of the beta series. They're trying to figure out actually how to run this. So this was at Thruxton. Obviously it was raining at Thruxton, which it quite often is. So this is if you live in the UK, this is sort of halfway in between London and Bristol, basically. It's that sort of place. So 6 teams, essentially tech teams, lots of university teams, so MIT, Carnegie Mellon, lots of teams from Switzerland, etc. What they do is they are given the software and they have to essentially program this car to go around a real track using sensors, that sort of thing. So what was really interesting was they had this race series and created what's called a metaverse. So although the track, as you see it, has nothing on it, as far as the car is concerned, there are what what they call collectibles and obstacles. So when they're augmented onto the track, you can see actually how the car is collecting the collectibles and avoiding the walls, and those led to essentially time penalties or time bonuses. So that was really interesting. There was also a slight sort of oopsie, I would call it, where one of the cars on the start line basically accelerated and then just turned right straight into a wall. So it was just a glitch in the software and was corrected, but that's probably why it hit the headlines, is because they saw a very expensive robot car going into a wall. But actually, if you watch the live cast, it's a brilliant I guess future vision and a very sort of interesting technical challenge as well. In ad tech news, so the ORG, so the Open Rights Group, have been essentially onto the tail of the ICO, so the Information Commissioner's Office. In that, if you are in sort of ad tech, so programmatic media, tracking, all those sorts of things, then you're actually, the programmatic media side of it is tracking people, their browsing preferences, and they haven't got any way of essentially stopping that data getting into different people's hands. So they're not really tracking it. They're not really saying you haven't signed up to consent of it. Yes, there's cookies, but as soon as the data is collected, it travels through lots of companies to actually deliver ads. So actually the Open Rights Group are taking the ICO to court to stop this happening, because, well, not in theory, actually in reality it's in breach of GDPR. So that could be interesting. Been trying to do it for a couple of years, and the reason they're trying to bring it to court now is because the ICO have kind of gone, yeah, well, look, you know, can't really do much about it, plus COVID and the stuff, so we're just going to basically ORG have said no, we want some decision on this. So it's been rumbling for a while, it's carrying on rumbling, and there's this kind of grey area of where does your data go when you're roaming websites, and that's coming to the fore, really. Thief Simulator VR. So yeah, the reason I thought this was interesting is, like, when does simulation become teaching, and at what point do you say maybe thieving is not really something we should be teaching? So it's not fantastically wholesome, maybe. Of course, it's only a piece of VR and you're not going to learn a huge amount from it. However, it's just interesting. So there are lots and lots of simulation games out there that if you're not really into them, then it will be a surprise to you. There is everything from, as I've said here, you know, there's gold mining to becoming an influencer. So this is just like the latest one, but it's VR, and it can teach you how to pick locks, for instance, how to get through security gates, where to smash windows, how to hide in the garden to avoid security lights, that sort of thing. So you go, not really so sure about that. However, if you want that, it's on Steam. Purina, so one of the world's largest pet food manufacturers, have got into the insect protein game. Now, there are a couple of companies that are doing this already, and essentially the pioneers in this. So you've got Yora and you've got Green Pet Food, and it's the black soldier fly that gets it most of the time. So the larvae of the black soldier fly is hugely protein rich. So you take the larvae, you obviously they're not alive when you do this. You then fry them and you grind them into a powder, and then you can use that powder, essentially a flour, to create a high protein flour. So why do this? Well, obviously creating animal feed from actual animals, chickens, pigs, cows, that sort of thing, is hugely damaging to the environment, just for the sheer amount of water and feed and chemicals and that sort of thing. So we've heard this a lot, and we've heard lots of scientists saying we should be eating bugs and larvae and crickets and locusts and things like that. So although this is this is not new, somebody like Purina doing this, and it will be through their Beyond Nature's protein line. So they're launching it. I think it's in Switzerland at the moment only, so we'll see that transfer across. But watch out for black soldier fly larvae dog food coming to a pet shop near you. And finally, we have to celebrate. Now, at this point, it's not been absolutely called, but I believe Biden is now going to be the president-elect. So it's a weird coincidence. It's 46 weeks, and it's going to be the 46th presidency. So I thought this was a really interesting experiment using the GPT-3 algorithm, which can essentially create content. It can create words. So what was happening here is, how can we create a slogan for the future of America that is bipartisan? So if you showed it to a Trump fan follower, then they would go, yeah, I wouldn't be offended by that. And if you showed them to a Biden fan follower, then also they would say the same thing. So these, essentially what happened here was it created slogans and was then put into another algorithm with somebody very sort of conservative or a right wing or a liberal, and it would battle them out until it wouldn't be offended by the slogans. So you've got some really good ones in here. So, you know, build a bold tomorrow. They're all plausible. That's the whole point. So, you know, a plan for a new beginning, and our future is ours. So I thought it was a fitting end to this week's. You may see one of these coming to a president near you soon. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next week.